especially as a young person when you haven't found your own path yet, can be quite difficult with all these notions that you meet, all these beliefs about how you should be and what you should do in order to be a successful artist. I think this, to a certain extent, sometimes changes when we talk about identity and what contributes to really being a fulfilled artist. It certainly also means that we have to ask ourselves what means success to ourselves, to us personally.
So great to see you on Zoom, to actually speak to you.
Yeah, likewise, Petra. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a great pleasure. I think the last time we saw each other was you from the balcony and me shouting from the street to take your picture.
Yes, I have very fond memories of that. That was such a great project you did. Really fantastic.
Thank you so much. And you've done so much since then. I mean, you started studying and you are now a performance psychologist.
That's right. I actually have quite a bit of history with psychology. So I studied psychology and violin performance at the same time in my bachelor's. But then the psychology degree was a bit shorter. So I took some time to really focus on violin performance. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I really struggled. I did a lot of auditions and competitions and did quite a few orchestra projects. It had always been my dream to become an orchestral musician. And I realized that the reality of it was sometimes maybe not what I'd expected, but more so I actually realized that I didn't yet have the coping skills for these very particular challenges for this profession. And so I decided to pursue my master's degree in psychology, and I also did a certification in psychological coaching to understand better how these things work and how I also can support others in really finding ways to thrive and to have a good balance, which I think is really important, even though it is a very dynamic notion, having balance if you are a musician. Yeah.
But it's interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting that you almost assume that if you're a musician or if you're an artist, performing artist, that you have that skill, that you sort of, that it comes natural, that's not something you think about.
That's true. And I think the other very common belief is that artistry or being a performing artist comes with suffering. So the kind of trade-off, you have this very fulfilling profession, you're following your passion, and naturally then you have to endure certain challenges or really just situations that are adverse and maybe not so good for your well-being. Maybe it's even that you have to suffer in order to be expressive as an artist. I encountered these beliefs quite a lot, and I think that contributes then to a kind of helplessness or a kind of acceptance towards circumstances that maybe you could actually influence yourself if you learned how to do it.
But isn't it also this assumption that you're talking about, so the suffering, but that, you have to really, dedicate your whole life and hours and hours and hours with the instrument and no life outside it. Otherwise, you're not going to be a successful musician. Yet you find artists who just absolutely love it, but cannot spend so much time with their instrument.
Yes, absolutely. And I am one of them. I think to this day, I'm still trying to find just also a position with the violin that will really allow me to play many hours a day. And I think this kind of struggle then sometimes necessitates to take a step back or to find other ways for fulfilling yourself or finding other aspects of your identity that also belong to you and that actually contribute to your artistry and that make you the artist that you want to be.
Mm. And do you think it's because sometimes you are thrown into a path that you're supposed to do this and this and this and this, and otherwise there's sort of there's a everybody assumes you have to do all these different things to become the best artist. So there's a stigma on if you don't go to or have a degree in music, then you're not necessarily a good musician.
Yes, I think that is a very strong belief, and I think to a certain degree I adhere to that myself. Like when I started studying psychology on the side next to violin, I thought they would kick me out at music university because certainly they would realize that I didn't practice enough. So I think, especially as a young person, when you haven't found your own path yet, can be quite difficult with all these notions that you meet, all these beliefs about how you should be and what you should do in order to be a successful artist. I think this, to a certain extent, sometimes changes when we talk about identity and what contributes to really being a fulfilled artist. It certainly also means that we have to ask ourselves what means success to ourselves, to us personally. And just, finding ways to express your own voice as an artist. And I think in classical music in particular, this is still very often not supported. So I found myself in a situation during my degree and certainly towards the end of it where I had a mindset of, I just don't want to make any mistakes. I need to do it right, which meant that others had to like it. My professors had to like it. A jury had to like it. But I had no clear idea, so like musical image as well, of what I wanted and what was good to me. And that then led to this feeling at the end of every day that I hadn't done enough and that I hadn't reached what I was supposed to during the day. Really, even if it was just a practice or rehearsal day, that made it very, very challenging. So in coaching, I think it's very important to support people in finding their why. So why they want to become or be an artist. And what is it that fascinates them about it? So the small moments in everyday life, like what is it that gives you joy? And of course, this doesn't mean that everything is always joyful or enjoyable, but having this understanding of what drives you, I think can make a big difference in finding your path towards personal success as well.
But it's interesting that you say finding your voice or finding what you want to express. And this is what many artists tell me, is that they can actually remember a time where they realized voice. We talk this language of their voice, but that is, what they want to say with the music or with whatever art they're doing. And for some artists, it happens already in their 20s. It happens at a young age. And then you speak to some who are already in their 40s, and then suddenly it's like, and this came on my path, and this is what I want to do. So, but it's that time frame where you have to discover what it is that you're now talking about, what it is that I want to say.
Yes, indeed. And in classical music, we're sometimes very restricted with this time frame that you just described, because especially as an orchestral musician now, I'm almost 32, that's quite old, because if you haven't had like an academy position by age of 28, that's usually the age limit, then it's extremely difficult to even be invited to the major auditions or to pursue this path. And I've talked to orchestral musicians who are very experienced after decades of playing the orchestra. They say, well, you need a certain skill set, so you have to develop these skills over time, and it's not beneficial for the orchestra to take someone who doesn't have a long career ahead of them and to teach them these skills. And that, I think, makes sense to a certain degree, but then these people with more experience in other regards, maybe in other artistic ways, or just in terms of life experience, certainly would bring many benefits to orchestras as well. And another challenge that I see is that this career often doesn't allow you to develop once you have succeeded in getting a position. So I have colleagues, I know people who are just not that happy in a tutti position when they've played there for many years, and they would like to take more responsibility or have a little autonomy and just change something. So I think there's a growing awareness of how we want to develop over a long career. And as musicians, we often have very long careers. And in that regard, we're different from dancers, for example. So like how to craft this career and how to enable people at any age to develop their musical and artistic skills, I think that will be or is a big question that we need to address.
Yeah, and do you think it's also to do with personality? Because sometimes you find you speak to, I speak to artists who have just broken the rules and just did their own thing in a way. They've started off by, say, a formal education, but then in some way they had this courage to just break away from everything and do their own thing. And for some, it seems to be that there's this blockage that they just cannot move away from this strict way of doing things, or the confined way of doing things.
Yes, I understand that is something that many may struggle with, especially given how music and classical music is often being taught still, also in higher education institutions. In terms of personality or certain traits that are necessary, I think we also see in research that there's quite a bit of variety still. So it's not that easy to tackle specific traits that are kind of predictive of artistic success. Courage is certainly very helpful, but you can develop that, I think. You can develop courage. You can develop your ability or your willingness to deal with adversity, with anxiety, with things that make you uncomfortable. For me, that would be a definition of courage. So I think there are factors or traits that you can develop over time, for sure. So when people come to see me in coaching, I would always make sure that I make them aware of their own resources and strengths, whatever these may be. This is so individual, and try and move away from this conception of what an artist should be like and what the personality should be like. And I myself actually had a moment in my last year in my violin study where my professor told me, you need to change your personality. Otherwise, you won't make it. And he was referring to my empathy and sensitivity, so that I was very susceptible to outer circumstances or perceiving and feeling what others are feeling too. And of course, in a certain way, that would make me vulnerable in a pressure situation. But on the other hand, this would, I'm sure, make me able to communicate with an audience or express certain nuances that others perhaps could not. So, God, but that really hurt. Hearing from your mentor that you are not the right personality, that was really, hurting, I think. So I try to move away from that and rather discover what individual strengths may enable you to pursue your path.
Yeah, and it's also, you have to be the person, or you have to be authentic. You have to be who you are. And I actually read an article where it says that authenticity has a higher vibration even than love. So we are more attracted to authenticity. So it's almost that you should be, if you're a sensitive being, you should be that. You shouldn't be blocking that in a way or pretending not to be. So you need to be authentic.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I think that is a very precious value indeed.
Yeah. So do you through studying, and you obviously talk a lot about how you could then look at yourself differently and look at the things that was maybe your obstacles. So do you think this helps you then to also help others, that you could now identify in somebody else the same type of problem, if I can call it a problem, but the characteristic then?
Yes, I think my own story, well, first of all, drives me to help others, to support them in finding ways, and also gaining knowledge that I have acquired over the years and found very helpful and just wished I had known while I was still a music student. So let me think. I believe it's important when you coach performing artists to have a good understanding of their profession, of what it means to be an artist. And this is also why I have chosen to work mostly with musicians, because this is just the environment that I know best. And I have worked with dancers and with actors as well. And I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. But I think when you really want to work on very specific topics, it can be very helpful just to know what the other person is talking about. That doesn't mean that you always need to have had the exact same experience as someone else. but it helps, and I think it gives you credibility too, just knowing what it's like, what the challenges are, and makes it easier to sometimes suggest options. Although that I wouldn't say is the main part of coaching, because it's really about enabling the other person to find their own way and to thrive in what they think works for them and is most important to them. But in studying psychology, in doing a lot of research in performance psychology, now working here at the University of Vienna in sports psychology, teaching a lot, I have gained a lot of knowledge about different techniques and strategies, also that have been beneficial for athletes, but really just different options that one can delve into when looking for solutions.
But do you think it's important that this type of coaching gets done, already from a young age, or do you have to wait until you find, or the person finds out that there's a problem? I don't want to call it a problem. I say a blockage, but rather than already from a young age where students are, playing the instrument, that they already get a type of coaching that makes them, that makes it possible for them to find their voice earlier or, sooner.
Yes, I think that would be very helpful. And I mean, that's being done in sports as well. The whole idea of talent development is that you nurture something that has potential, and sometimes we might not see it right away, which is why it can be incredibly fruitful to provide resources to someone at a young age to help them develop in a way that is beneficial to them and can enable them to train their skills and develop.
And how do you see also pressure? I mean, so sometimes I think somebody's maybe talented in a specific instrument or a talented musician, but that they don't necessarily want to do it. That they're not fulfilled by doing that, but that because they're talented, they feel obligated to play the instrument because everybody's saying, "Oh, you're so talented. Oh, you should be playing this." How much does that play a role?
So I guess this is a question of motivation and what kind of motivation drives you. So whether you're actually intrinsically motivated, which often is reduced to enjoying what you're doing, but it's not just enjoying, it can also mean that you really like to engage in challenges or in solving tricky technical problems, for example. But if you're more externally driven, for example, because your parents force you or your professors tell you that you should practice 6 hours a day or 8 or whatever, then that is a restriction in your autonomy. And in the long term, I think this can lead to a point where you're really questioning everything. Why you are doing this, why you're maybe not doing other things that you'd rather do instead of practicing or rehearsing or training. So this balance between different kinds of motivation is quite important. I'm not saying that you need to be exclusively intrinsically motivated, and there's also other kinds of motivation, like seeing what you're doing as part of your identity or acknowledging that practicing deliberately leads to better artistic quality. But when it's exclusively extrinsically motivated, what you're doing, that in the long term kind of deprives you of experiencing autonomy and fulfilling your psychological needs.
And how would you go about in coaching? I mean, what does a coaching experience with you looks like?
So first we would try to understand together where you want to be afterwards. So it's important to have a very clear understanding where I can help and support and what it's supposed to be like at the end. And sometimes this can also take quite a bit of time, just really developing this image and this idea of this is where I want to go. And of course, you can look into particular aspects or problems, if you want to say, but I try to not focus on the problematic aspects too much, but rather looking into what do you want to change and where do you want to go. Also, sometimes what do you want to maintain? What do you want to keep? And again, what are your strengths, your resources? What gives you confidence? And how can you expand your comfort zone and your horizon in a way? So first, it's this setting a goal for our process. And then it's finding different ways of addressing where you want to go with it. This is rather individual. And let's say you come to see me because you want to have a more fulfilled performance experience because you feel rather impeded by your performance anxiety or your nervousness, then we need to analyze what are the aspects that are especially impeding. Is it more the physical tension? Is it more how you talk to yourself? Is it the emotional aspect? And what are maybe past experiences where you would say this was a really fulfilling performance? What made it that? How did you get there? And understanding what are my individual needs and how do I prepare for a performance. So this can mean really the days and hours leading up to the performance, but also the very few minutes before you start playing. So this was really the focus of my research. Like a lot was on this particular moment and what you can do mentally, physically, in a behavioral way. Like what can you actually do that gets you into an optimal state of performing. And then of course also what happens after the performance. So how do you kind of calm yourself down? How do you get out of this stage personality, so to speak? And how do you evaluate your performance? How do you attribute success? And how do you move on then towards the next performance? So it can involve different tools, of course, especially when you work with performance anxiety. It's sometimes working for the underlying causes or mechanisms, but also having certain self-regulation tools that not only help you regulate arousal or deal with certain thoughts, for example, or creating positive and confident thoughts, but also gaining a security through these tools. So my clients often report to me that they find it extremely helpful just having to do something, like knowing, okay, in this situation, I have this particular tool that will help me. And even if you don't need to use it all the time, it's just there for you and gives you security. So that would be just one example. And certainly managing performance anxiety is a big topic.
But that's also something that you almost you cannot imagine that a performer or a musician can have anxiety, performance anxiety. But I wonder how many people or how many artists really avoid performing because of this anxiety.
Yeah, I think it's something that hadn't been talked about for a very long time. And it's losing some of its stigma, I would say, from what I observe, from what I hear from colleagues, from what I see happening at different universities, conservatories, music schools, other performing arts institutions, of course, is not exclusively music. So that established performers talk more about it, and that it's being seen more as something that can occur and that is not something you need to feel guilty for, something that is sometimes inherent in the pressure that you experience with certain situations. And sometimes there is a lot at stake with different performances, especially, of course, when you audition for a position that you've always wanted, or with an ensemble you've always wanted to work with. But as musicians in particular, also as dancers or as actors, we sometimes adhere to this belief that we cannot possibly make a mistake. And that also creates a lot of anxiety. And another aspect that is not that well understood yet, I think, is also how we need to practice in order to feel secure before a performance. So so I think it's sometimes a bit like trial and error. So you don't have a clear understanding of when you actually know a piece that well that you could perform it under any circumstances. And this means that you have to challenge yourself a lot during the practice process. And I think sometimes people underestimate this a lot. So when I talk about performing under high pressure, I also need to talk about performing under low pressure. And that means that you perform, for example, at home, you record yourself saying, this is the take, this is it, or just having a very, very friendly audience there, like a couple of friends maybe. So this would be a low pressure situation. And challenging yourself to really treat it as a performance just as you would when you walk on a big stage can help you understand what happens then. Are you ready? In what state is your piece, is your performance? And the people I've worked with, like especially younger students, they sometimes lack this understanding and then think that when it doesn't work on stage somehow, or things happen on stage, that this is exclusively attributable to their nervousness or anxiety. But sometimes they haven't understood yet what this step between just practicing and going over it in repetitions or being able to stop at any given moment to being able to perform, but not yet in a pressure situation, to performing it in a really high pressure situation means. So this is really a progress
that makes
that
so much sense.
you
Yeah.
need to go through. And so we have that also in sports. We call it pressure training. So athletes and like their teams, they spend a lot of time with challenging themselves in different circumstances to understand how they work under pressure and how they need to adapt their training and their skills so that then they can actually show what they trained for in a pressure situation. And I like to encourage my clients to do that too, because it can help you understand where you are and how you want to develop. I have to say as well, though, that this is not always easy to put into practice when you're also under a lot of time pressure. And as artists, we often are under huge time pressure. We have a lot of repertoire to learn, or very often you're being asked kind of spontaneously to step in for someone, or you don't have enough time really to prepare in the way you would when you have several months to prepare. So this is certainly a challenge where you then need very specific goal setting and very specific strategies to make your practice as efficient as possible.
Well, I think, it's I can understand what you mean there, but it's always difficult to understand also that if I spend time on trying to figure this out, then all the other things will fall into place, and that's sometimes that. But what I realized also during lockdown, when I photographed a lot of artists in their windows, and I asked, there was a stage where I think somebody played the guitar, and then somebody else saw it and asked, could they sing or could they play? And then I started asking, would you like to do something through the window, play through or sing or something? And many did, but there were many that would play an instrument and then afterwards say to me, can I just check, if it's good enough, or I maybe have to take another take. And I said, oh, it's beautiful. And then they say, no, but the problem is it's not about other people seeing it, but it's about my colleagues seeing it. So that pressure and then I realized for many artists, it's not necessarily the pressure from the audience, like me, a non-musician, but it's the pressure from the colleagues, that that makes them a bit anxious.
Oh yeah, I think that is a great challenge indeed. Yeah. The colleagues and the people who really know what you're doing, that can create huge pressure. And in a way, we're being socialized that way in the educational system too. But there's certainly ways to connect with your colleagues and see them as fellow artists, starting by going into performances and trying to really appreciate other people who are doing the same thing as you are, rather than cultivating a kind of critical mindset, which of course sounds maybe a bit trivial, or sometimes easier than it may seem. But being aware that we're all in the same boat, and we are. So I think what I'd like to say about that is I meet a lot of artists who believe that they are the only ones who have issues with their self-confidence, or the only ones who have self-doubts, and everyone else is super confident on stage and would never think about these things. And if we allowed ourselves to talk more about this and to open up and be more vulnerable, then I think this would contribute to a culture of more like being together rather than
Absolutely.
in competition. But I'm also scared of playing to other violinists.
Oh,
So
is it? But
it's a very
yeah,
specific situation, and knowing that you're being evaluated by people who really know your instrument or your art. This is not something I have straightforward advice to,
oh, yeah.
for sure.
Well, I spoke to a painter once, and I asked him about this, about competition between painters. That if you are at the art exhibition and you look at somebody else's work and that type of thing. And he's a teacher, and he said he tries to always see other people's work as something to either learn from or to be inspired by. So he never sees it as a competition. And he said in that way of looking at it, he actually gets inspired, or he would go home and think, okay, this is a great idea that this person have, but how can I apply it for what I'm doing? And I thought for me, that was such a great lesson as well, and for rather looking at something in a way of being open for inspiration rather than being, feeling insecure or feeling, that I'm not worth the same or that my work is not worth the same. So, yeah, that was just something really a lovely, valuable lesson that I heard.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Oh, I
Yeah,
love that story. Yeah. And that's what I meant before with going
yeah,
into a performance and seeing what you like and what you appreciate. And yeah, seeing it as inspiration for sure.
but I also wondered, now that I'm talking about the painter, how much in certain forms of art, so as for example, a singer, it's the singer's voice, so it's inside you. Whereas when you play an instrument, it's a little bit outside you, but yet uh, it's still part of you, the instrument. So you're still the one with the instrument, controlling the instrument. Whereas with a painter, for example, their work is totally separate from them. They stand very much separate. And how much that also affects the artist, that almost when you hold the violin, it's you, it's almost part of you.
Yes, it is part of you, I think. And then it is part of your person and part of your identity. And then that makes you rather vulnerable to criticism, of course. But on the other hand, it is such a great way to connect with emotions and expressing them. I find that so valuable. I'd really not want to miss it ever, be it playing the violin or singing. And acknowledging this connection as well, that the instrument is part of you and you take care of it as if it were like part of your body. I just think that that's a really beautiful idea.
And after learning all these things and also the experience that you have now, do you find it easier now?
Good question. I was playing opera yesterday and I noticed that I'm more able to perceive processes in my body, in the communication, in the orchestra, between the conductor, with the singers. And on the other hand, yeah, I certainly have more possibilities to notice something and then decide whether I want to react to it or not. Sometimes, of course, it's a very split second moment, then it's not so easy to make that conscious decision. But in a way that makes it much richer, the experience. And I'd like to cite one of my former supervisors. She's a great music psychologist. Her name is Jane Ginsburg. And she said, knowledge is a great tool to reduce fear. And I think having all this knowledge about, about the psychology of performing and of making music has certainly taken away some of the fear that I had when I was younger and did not even have access to this knowledge. But at the same time, when I left the rehearsal yesterday, I also thought, wow, it's just really, it's a great profession, but it's also so challenging. I think my knowledge also makes me see everything that is necessary to be a great artist. All the skills that you need to have, and the different aspects and how it all fits together in a big ensemble. So I think it also makes me appreciate a lot. Also, when I hear other people or watch other people perform, it certainly does that too.
But also, you were saying previously that you don't necessarily focus on the problems, but that you talk more about what the artist would like to achieve, or you talking about the goals, and that also then also gives a person that knowledge or that information to reduce the fear, because they know then where they're heading to, or they understand maybe why they are feeling a certain way. So amazing that you are now also making other artists equipped to deal with whatever they have to deal with.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I think that is kind of part of my vision of what I want to do and what I want to contribute now and in the future. I find that very fulfilling. And yes, it's the knowledge, it's giving artists the space also to self-reflect and to become aware of certain things and certain processes in their lives. And another part is the research, of course, and then also to work towards establishing psychology as an important part of the artistic education in institutions. So, like you said before, I think this can already start at a very young age. And I think we need to all work together in finding ways how to do this, because it shouldn't mean that the music or instrumental teacher or voice teacher is responsible for everything. So how to implement this kind of support also at a music school, for example, we will have to work towards. But on the other hand, there are certain tools that music teachers can learn as well to implement in their teaching practice. So we have a lot to do, but it's an exciting path, and I look forward to contributing to everything that may come.
Well, I think it's amazing what you're doing, and the fact that you are so in tune with other people, and that you can understand what they're going through, and that you've been there as well. I think that makes it so much more powerful.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Yeah.
But Veronika, you've mentioned a few things that you would like to achieve, but what is the great wish for you?
I would like to have psychological support for artists that is similar to what great athletes have as well. And I realize that this is ambitious with regard to financial resources, but first to create this understanding of the importance of it and what all the different aspects of it are, so that performance psychology is not just about achieving peak performance, but really about becoming a wholly and holistically fulfilled human being. That I think is really important to communicate. So I want to make sure that artists have access to the knowledge, like we said before, and that they have someone they know they can go to when they struggle or when they would like to have support. Because, like we said at the beginning, maybe we have this notion that this very special profession comes with many different challenges, but you certainly don't have to go through it alone.
Yeah.
And that can be individually, like in individual coaching, or it can also be in a group where you can connect to other artists and see that you're really not alone in many challenges that you may face.
Yeah, and I think it's also this idea of that you also mentioned before, that at a certain age you already have to have achieved a specific goal, and then so you have to be there at a specific time, but that everybody has their own time frame or their own speed of of getting where they want to be or where they have to be, and it's that notion of what is your success, not necessarily what is the success that everybody else is expecting you to have.
Yeah, absolutely. The notion of personal success, I hold that very high, because I also teach master students in psychology. I stopped a few months ago, but I've done that for a couple of years. And there as well, I wanted them to have a personal mastery experience. So I started out with this seminar, calling it expert performance, and then slowly moved towards the road to personal success, because I realized that this just means something different for each and every person. And even if you're moving towards becoming a psychologist, you might have artistic qualities or interests that you would like to pursue. And it was just so valuable to see how my students just needed a bit of structure and tools to really understand how they could engage in a new field that they had maybe neglected for many years, or they had just began to play the piano or do something that was rewarding to them. And for others, it was not even about achieving a certain performance goal, but it was about cultivating, I would say, a different relationship with themselves. For example, getting more into meditation, or ensuring that they had a better sleep quality, or different aspects of really your own well-being. I'm saying this even though they were not artists, because it made me realize all the different components that there are to thriving and personal well-being. And even though I had set out in my teaching, wanting to enable students to get better at a certain skill, I realized that, of course, I should allow them, if they wanted to work on becoming more grateful. So maybe having a gratitude journal or something like that, rather than practicing a musical skill. So I'm using this as an example just to illustrate what personal success can mean. And it's definitely not all about the biggest audience or the greatest financial success or whatever one may think is commonly understood under success. But I think we are at a point as a society as well where we understand that the personal well-being is very important, and also certain longevity, now that we have such long lives to live, very often, many lucky ones of us. So personal success as an artist can also mean that you acknowledge all the different aspects of your life that give you meaning, well-being. And if that means that, in my case, for example, I only perform a couple of times each month rather than every second day, or have a big performance every week, then yeah, that's my personal success.
Yeah, but it's I mean, so many people that I speak to, and so many different forms of art that I delve into. And I also realize that many people do something completely different, and then suddenly at a certain age, they start doing something just as a hobby, or like one artist that I spoke to, she did something completely different, and then she one day had to make a wedding gift for somebody, and she just had clay around, and she made something with clay, and now she's a clay artist.
Wow.
And it happened from there, you know. And just yesterday I spoke to a guy that he sews on with the sewing machine on canvas, and this is something, he was in IT, and this is something that he just started doing, and now this is how he makes his living, by doing this form of art. So it's wonderful that you have that, you know, that you discuss that with these students, that they realize also that there's so many things aside from the one thing you're doing. There's so many things in life that maybe is your next path that you don't know of, you know, that you discover about yourself. So,
yes. Yeah, that's so beautiful about life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think what's also rather valuable is if you have support on this path. So what my students and also my clients often tell me is that it's been about this interaction with each other, or listening to each other, learning from each other, that made it possible for them. And I think this is so important to be aware of and seek the social support.
I tell you, it's that feeling of somebody's got my back, you know. It's like that motivation you sometimes need. I think we all do. You sometimes just need somebody to say, hey, let's try it this way, or just hang in there, or you're doing great, or you know, just that motivation, or try and think of it this way, you know, that just somebody like you as a coach to just make you think in a different way, I think makes you also then perceive things in a different way.
I agree, but that's also what you're doing in your work, or this project in the pandemic with taking photos of artists at the window or the balcony. That was exactly that, you know, showing that they're important and that you've got their back as someone who makes them visible at a time where maybe they sometimes felt they did not have the support or became suddenly invisible because there was no stage. So I really, really love that about your work as well, especially as a photographer.
I must say I was blessed so much with doing that, more than I think that I could do anything. But yeah, it was a lovely project. I'm still working on trying to figure out how can I do an exhibition, because I would
that would be
love to
great.
have those pictures. There's about 500, so I would love to have that in an exhibition.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I think Vienna needs that, to see the wonderful people that are hidden in its buildings. So that's my wish for the future.
Beautiful.
But anyway, Veronika, this was so great to talk to you. You are doing absolutely wonderful work. And I think, I have children who are ballet dancers, so I know exactly the industry in the dance industry, and what, I have an idea of what's going on. And I know also the pressure that dancers have and that you as musicians have. I know also a few musicians, and and then I think it's so valuable, the work that you're doing. And it had to be you to do it because the industry, you've been there. So I think that's great that you have this path now that you're on.
Thank you, Petra.
It's
It was a
great
delight to to speak with you, play with you, maybe
Yeah,
also that. Yeah.
play for me. Well, it's like a little concert.
No, really, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for giving me some space to talk about my ideas and sharing the inspiration together.
Yeah, great question. No, I absolutely. When I saw what you're doing, I just thought this needs airtime because this is wonderful that you're doing, and really, I think it's the support that you can give and that you are able to give would be so valuable to many young artists, and I hope there will be many people that will have also, because I think that's also the thing, that they have the courage to go and say, I need help. I think that's also part of the thing.
Yes, that's true. I think it's help, support, just someone to talk to sometimes. It does not mean that you're weak or that something's wrong with you, like not at all. So it's really more this idea of finding ways to improve and to learn how to deal with certain challenges that probably most of us have to face.
Oh, definitely.